Jim, you mentioned CBDCs, you mentioned blockchain, you mentioned crypto. What is your view on all of these things? I think I read a quote with you somewhere saying that when you try to decentralize a financial system, you are going to get a reaction, sometimes a violent reaction from whoever you're trying to take that control away from. What do you see in those things? I know crypto is different from a CBDC, but what do you see?
Yeah, I mean, I don't own crypto. I don't recommend it. Everyone's like, "Oh, Jim's a technological Neanderthal. He doesn't get it." It's like, no, I was in a gold versus Bitcoin debate in 2010 out in Devon, a little bit west of London. And when I'm in a debate, I like to know more about my opponent's subject than he does, because I don't want to get picked off. I want to win the debate. So I've been immersed in this. I read all the technical papers and white papers, and I look at crypto exchanges. I understand what DeFi is. I get all of it. I don't think it's going anywhere. That's the view. Could be right, could be wrong, but I do understand it. And the thing about central bank digital currencies is they're not cryptocurrencies. They're not blockchain. The ledger, because blockchain is just a ledger. It's just a bookkeeping way. It's digital, but the blockchain technology has been around since the 80s. There's nothing new about it, but it's your ledger, and it can be decentralized. Central bank digital currencies, there'll be a ledger, but it'll be maintained by the central bank. And a CBDC dollar is still a dollar. A central bank digital euro is still a euro. Central bank digital yen is still a yen. So it's not a new currency. It's a new payment channel, a new settlement and clearance channel. And it is better, faster, cheaper. I mean, if I buy something with a credit card, how does that work? Well, I'm at the point of purchase. I use a credit card. The merchant has a receivable, so they sell it to somebody called a merchant acquirer, who scoops up a whole bunch of credit card receivables. Then the merchant acquirer sells it to MasterCard or Visa, whoever the card sponsor was, and they get paid. And then MasterCard, Visa takes these small over the world, and then they send them to the banks that issue the credit cards. And then those credit card issuers send me a bill, and I pay it. Well, you got five parties in that transaction. You got the customer, the merchant acquirer, MasterCard, and the issuing bank, and like 2.5%, 3% fees end to end. Well, that's a really clunky, messy, expensive, slow system. You can eliminate all of that. You can disintermediate the banking system and MasterCard, Visa. Interesting stock implications there. With a CBDC, I can have an account at the Fed on my iPhone, and I can send you money. You can have an account at the Fed or Bank of England, whatever you like. And so it is better, faster, cheaper. But it's also the ultimate surveillance tool. This will complete their surveillance state. They already know enough about us with GPS tracking. You got to turn your cell phone off and stick it in a Faraday sack. I have a few of those I carry with me if you want to avoid being tracked in real time. So they already know a lot about us and digital, facial recognition software, et cetera. But this will be the ultimate, because I go to a bookstore, I'm on Amazon using a central bank digital currency. They know that I just bought a book called, Why I Love Donald Trump or whatever, And if you're the wrong political party, wrong political affiliation, give money to the wrong candidate, et cetera, oppose the regime in any way, they're going to know it in real time through your payment history. And they'll be able to, China, I mean, China, they're already doing this. I say stuff like this, Brian, and people roll their eyes like, oh, that'll never happen. I was like, no, you don't understand. It's already here. It's not universal. It's getting there. This is what they do in China. This is what the social credit score is all about. People can't send their kids to colleges, can't buy a plane ticket, can't buy a train ticket, et cetera, because they have a low social credit score. It could be they were caught smoking, but it could be they tweeted something that was like anti-Xi. But this will come to Europe, Japan, and the US. And don't believe anyone who says, well, yeah, we could do that, but don't worry, trust us, we won't do that. Nonsense. The government never gives up power, never misses an opportunity to get more power. So that's where central bank digital currencies are going. As far as cryptocurrencies are concerned, I studied it I've studied it for kind of 12 years at this point, but I wrestled with it. It's like, okay, I read all the technical papers, I get it, I look at the charts, I hear, but I can't really understand it. Like, what's it all about? Because what's happened is that an ecosystem has been created around, I'll say Bitcoin, but it could be some other cryptocurrencies. And there are exchanges, there are custodians, there are hedge funds that, buy and sell these things. There are analysts, there are charts, there are technicians. The entire ecosystem of Wall Street has been wrapped around Bitcoin with one difference, which is there's nothing there. At least if I'm analyzing Tesla, maybe you like it, I hate it, whatever. We can have a good debate about Tesla or Netflix or anybody. But at least there's like a real company there doing something that where we can argue. And then the ecosystem of custodian, settlement clearance, brokers, all that stuff, technicians, charts, wraps around something that's when I say real company, it doesn't have to be tangible. Amazon's not very tangible. It's a real company. But there's like no there. Where's the kernel of the thing? And it's not there. So there's no use case other than, like tax evasion or money laundering or something. So how to understand it? And I didn't really get a grasp of it until I did a really deep dive. And I'm talking years of study and, like 20 books on communications theory. And in particular, the digital environment. Marshall McLuhan said when they put Sputnik up in, I think, 1958 or 59, he said the entire planet became a human artifact because we were wrapping the planet in aluminum. That was it. But he was right. And they say, they're saying we don't know who discovered water, but we're certain it was not a fish. Because a fish is in water. When you're immersed in something, you don't know it's there. You got to take the fish out of the water, and the fish goes, "Hey, where's the water?" But when you're in it, you don't know it. You're immersed in. We're immersed in an electronic environment, which is acoustic, tactile, non-linear. We've been reading for 2,500 years since Plato, reading books. But now all of a sudden, that doesn't matter. I mean, you can't go to a restaurant without hearing hip hop on the speakers. We're immersed in this digital electronic environment, and cryptocurrencies are part of that. So they're actually hallucinogenic. Everyone sees what they want to see. And then when you think about it, let's say you're 25 years old. And I've seen data on what percentage of the age group of the cohort own Bitcoin or other cryptos, by cohort. And the lowest, over 60 is the lowest. There could be big account. This isn't a dollar thing or a dollar equivalent thing. Essentially, you can't talk about Bitcoin without talking about dollars. That tells you something. But it's not the size of the account. It's the number of those in the cohort who owns anything. And the highest percentage, not surprisingly, are Generation X and millennials. But these are people who were playing video games from the age of 4. And going back to the 90s when they were growing up, video games had digital currencies. That's how the game sponsors made money. Like your army's losing, but you for $20 using your parents' credit card, you could buy more armies. So of course, when Bitcoin came along, they're like digital currencies seemed like the most natural thing in the world because they had been playing these video games for 10 years at that point. So they were adopters, but it was no more real than the video game, but it was part of this electronic environment that I'm describing. So we're in this electronic environment. It's an acoustic tactile world. So what are the characteristics of that we should look out for? One is tribalism, and McLuhan, and there are many other scholars, Eric Havelock and Walter Ong and others, but McLuhan's my favorite, great Canadian, by the way. But he said tribal. He was the one who coined the phrase global village. And everyone said, village, that sounds kind of cool. We all sit around the campfire and share. No, villagers kill each other. So, and when he said tribalism, he didn't mean it. He said, I didn't say it was good. I just said it's coming. And so it helps to explain, the dysfunction of society and the political polarization. When you put that in a communications theory context, you get tribalism. And that explains a lot of behavior. And so my take on Bitcoin, it won't replace the dollar, but it may destroy the dollar by destroying the concept of money. We're into moneyness. We've lost the threat. We don't know what money is anymore. We have moneyness, some characteristics, some not. That's what Bitcoin's really doing. It's turning money into moneyness with different so-called forms of money having different characteristics, but we've lost the thread. We don't know what money is.